They laughed as they handed her the keys to a crumbling old mansion after her husband's death, calling it her inheritance. With 2 kids and nowhere else to go, she moved into the rotting walls they thought would break her. But deep inside that ruin, she found something they never saw coming. Before we continue, kindly take a moment to comment where in the world you're watching from. And if you love the story, kindly subscribe. The church smelled faintly of lilies and cold rain. Naomi Carter sat in the front pew, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles arched. Her husband's casket lay just a few feet away, polished mahogany glistening under the dim light. The air was heavy, too heavy for someone who'd spent the last 2 weeks running on half-leap and empty coffee cups. Her 2 kids, Jordan and Maya, huddled close. Maya's head pressed into Naomi's side. Jordan kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Every so often, Naomi felt his fingers twitch against hers like he was fighting the urge to cry. Behind them, she could hear muffled laughter. Not the light, bittersweet kind you sometimes hear at funerals when someone recalls a warm memory. No, this was sharp cold. The in-laws, they'd always carried that smirk, the one that said she never belonged. By the time the will was read a week later, Naomi was already bracing herself. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and ink, the radiator clicking in the corner. One by one, the family received their shares, vacation properties, bank accounts, investments. Then the pause. The lawyer cleared his throat, sliding a single tarnished key across the table. Naomi Carter, the Carter estate on Willow Lane. Her sister-in-law let out a short, ugly laugh. Oh, she gets the mansion, if you can even call it that. Place should have been bulldozed years ago. The room erupted in chuckles. Naomi forced a swallow. Mansion. She'd seen photos, boarded windows, weed swallowing the front steps, a roofline sagging under decades of neglect. They weren't giving her a home. They were giving her a punishment. As the keys scraped into her palm, Naomi caught the look in their eyes, pity mixed with spite. She just nodded once, gathered her bag and left. The cold air outside hid like a wall. Jordan and Maya trailed beside her. The key felt heavy in her hand, heavier than it should have been. The message was clear. They turned their backs on her, and now she had nowhere else to go. The first time Naomi saw the place in person, it didn't look abandoned. It looked like it had given up. The iron gates hung crooked. One hinge snapped clean through. Ivy crawled up the stone pillars like it was trying to strangle what was left of the Carter name. She pushed the gates open. The sound was a long, aching groan that seemed to echo through the empty yard. Jordan stepped over a cracked path, sneakers crunching on gravel and broken glass. Maya stayed close, clutching the strap of her backpack. The mansion's windows were clouded with grime. The front door swelled in its frame. Naomi had to throw her shoulder into it before it finally gave way. Inside, the air was thick, damp, a smell like wet wood and dust that had been trapped for decades. Wallpaper peeled in curling strips, revealing dark stains beneath. The chandelier in the entryway hung at a lopsided angle, crystal pieces missing like teeth. She found one room where the floor didn't sag too much, and that's where they laid out their sleeping bags. That night, the wind pushed against the cracked walls, whistling through unseen gaps. Somewhere in the house, something skewered in the ceiling. Days blurred into a slow rhythm. Naomi scrubbing mold from the kitchen tiles, patching a window with cardboard, hanging blankets to keep out the draft. She took cleaning jobs in town, coming home with sore hands, and just enough groceries for the week. The neighbors barely looked her way. The in-laws didn't call. The mansion stood in silence, as if waiting for her to break. But every night before she closed her eyes, Naomi stared up at the cracked ceiling and told herself the same thing. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the house damp and colder than usual. Naomi was in the kitchen scrubbing rust from an old pot when she heard Jordan's voice echo from above. "Mom, you need to see this." She climbed the narrow attic stairs, each step creaking like it might give way. The air up there was thick with dust swirling in the thin shafts of light that leaked through broken tiles. Jordan was crouched near one of the beams, running his finger along the wood. Edged into it, faint but deliberate, were rows of numbers and symbols. Some looked like coordinates, others like strange short hand. Naomi crouched beside him, tracing the grooves with her own hand. The markings were too neat to be random, too deliberate to be just some bored kid's graffiti. Her husband had once told her stories about his family shipping business, how they moved goods up and down the coast in the early 1900s, how certain records were always kept off the books. She remembered the look in his eyes when he said it, half pride, half something else. She took a quick photo on her phone, the kind you don't really know why you're taking until later. That night, lying in the dark with Maya curled against her, the image wouldn't leave her mind. Why hide something in the attic? And why use codes instead of plain words? The next day, Naomi began looking at the house differently, not just as a burden, but as something holding secrets. Still, she wasn't ready to believe there was anything worth finding. Not yet. The codes nodded at her for days. Every time she scrubbed a wall or cleared a room, she found herself glancing at the floorboards, the baseboards, the walls, wondering what else the mansion might be hiding. One damp morning, she decided to tackle the dining room. The carpet was threadbare, edges curling with a dark water stain spreading near the far wall. As she pulled it back, she felt it. A small gap in the wood. The boards didn't match. Naomi knelt, running her fingers along the seam. Dust puffed up as she pried at it with the edge of a butter knife. The board lifted, revealing a square of iron bolted into the floor. Her heart thumped. It wasn't big, maybe 2 feet across, but it was heavy, sealed with rusted bolts. She fetched an old wrench from the shed, each twist grating against her palms. It took hours, breaks in between to rest her aching wrists before the final bolt clanged free, a trapdoor. When she pulled it open, stale air rose up, dry and metallic. A narrow stone staircase spiraled down into shadow. The smell was different from the rest of the house, older, heavier, like time had been sitting still. She fetched a flashlight and took the first step. The walls were cold to the touch, beads of moisture clinging to the stone. Each step echoed, swallowed by the dark below. The staircase ended in a small chamber. Rows of wooden racks stood against the walls, their surfaces thick with dust, but they weren't filled with wine bottles. Instead, heavy chests, iron-banded, their locks tarnished but intact, sat where the wine should have been. Rolled canvases wrapped in brittle paper leaned against the corner. Her breath caught. This wasn't storage. This was something someone had meant to hide. Naomi didn't open a thing that day. She stood air, heart pounding, realizing that this, whatever this was, might be the first thing that could change her children's lives. But she needed to be sure before she let herself hope. Naomi didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every groan in the rafters felt louder, sharper. She kept picturing those chests in the cellar, wondering if the in-laws even knew they existed or if they'd forgotten on purpose. The next morning she called in sick to her cleaning job. Jordan and Maya were at school, so it was just her in the empty mansion. She returned to the dining room, flashlight in hand, and descended the narrow steps again. The air felt cooler today, but not in a bad way, more like a vault. She crouched by the first chest, brushing away decades of dust. The lock crumbled after a few strikes with the wrench inside gold coins. Not a few, layers of them, stacked and gleaming even in the weak beam of her light. Their edges were worn smooth, the kind of patina you only see in museums. The next chest was heavier. When she pried it open, stacks of thick paper stared back. Old stock certificates, bonds from rail companies she'd only heard about in history documentaries, each with embossed seals still intact. In the far corner, she untied one of the rolled canvases. The paper crinkled as she unwrapped it, revealing an oil painting of a 19th century harbor. Sails masked storm clouds, signed by an artist whose name she recognized instantly from a book she'd read years ago. She sat back, hands trembling. This wasn't just valuable. This was history, and it had been sitting under her feet while the family sneered, calling the place worthless. A week later, an appraiser from the city walked the cellar with wide eyes, murmuring to himself. By the time he left, the number was burned into her mind. $150 million in total value, and every item legally hers. Naomi didn't cry right away. She sat in the quiet, letting the figure sink in, feeling the weight shift from despair to something else, control. For the first time since her husband died, she didn't feel like a guest in someone else's world. She was the one holding the keys now. 3 months later, the mansion didn't look like the same place. Fresh paint dressed the walls in a soft cream. The windows gleamed, and the roof stood proud against the sky. Workers bustled around the lawn, trimming hedges and laying stone paths where weeds once reigned. Naomi stood on the front steps in a tailored navy coat, hair pulled back, her children flanking her. Behind them, the grand double doors waited to be opened to the public for the first time in half a century. Reporters lined the driveway, cameras flashing, and there, near the back of the crowd, stood her in-laws, faces stiff with forced smiles. They hadn't been invited, but of course they'd shown up, drawn by the scent of money and attention. When the time came, Naomi took the microphone. "This house was given to me as a burden," she said, voice steady. "Today it stands as proof that value isn't decided by those who can't see it." She cut the ribbon. Applause rose, shutters clicked. The children stepped forward with her, and the door swung open, revealing the restored interior, gleaming floors, chandeliers sparkling, the air rich with the scent of polished wood. The in-laws didn't move closer. They didn't have to. Naomi caught their eyes, held them for a beat, and smiled, not out of spite, but because she no longer needed their approval. The mansion was hers, the history was hers, and the legacy would be her children's. They thought they were giving her a burden, but she turned it into a legacy. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their worth, and drop a comment with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove strength always finds its way.